the morning sunrise. In Lion's Gate 'neath the tall fir trees, on your face feel the ocean breeze. Feel the magic that's in the air, in Lion's Gate the fair.
Welcome to another installment of The Lion's Den. I am Baron Kenrick, and tonight we get to hear about camping in our game. Mistress Anisa and Master Guillaume are both companions of the Order of the Laurel, and both members of the Order of the Carp, which is given to those who show exemplary commitment to presenting persona. They are two of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and their encampment is an inspiration to all who enjoy its hospitality. They've generously offered to walk us all through some of the things they've done to make their encampment so beautiful, so period, and so welcoming. They're going to share some of their tips and tricks for improving your campsite, whether you're just starting out or whether you're looking to improve on the hard work you've already invested in a period encampment. You'll get ready to learn a lot about how to make your SCA home a nice place to live, but more importantly, get ready for a visit with two warm, welcoming, friendly people who are eager to share their prodigious knowledge with anyone who has a thirst for knowledge. Welcome to you both, and show us your stuff.
Wow, what a nice intro. Thank you.
Nice. All right,
Cool.
well, hi everybody. I'm Guillaume,
I'm Anisa.
and we're gonna share a little bit of our journey of putting camp together. It has a name. It's Camp Fromage. It is.
That
We don't
sounds kind
really-
of cheesy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a history to that. We actually didn't have a name until we had an event that we went to where we had to put our camp's name on the map for other people to find it. And so it was out of cell range, and we're like, okay, what would everyone in our group recognize as us, given no prior arrangement? And we came up with Fromage, and sure enough, everyone came in, found us on the map, and knew it was us. So that's how that happened. I think the overall, the arc, like the big picture of Camp Fromage is that we really love putting as period as possible within reason aesthetic together. And we really love being in camp in a field at events. Like that is our happy place. And the key takeaway thing that I would instill in everyone is that this did not happen overnight. And we're going to kind of walk you through the various phases. But how long have you been playing in the SCA, Anisa? She has to think about it.
I went to my first camping event in 1990 and my first SCA event in 1988 or 89. Yeah. And like a lot of people, I started out in dump tents when I was a college student. And then, so one of the things we wanted to talk about in general is just the arc of sort of building and adding over time, that we didn't, show up at our first event with this elaborate, beautiful camp and a dozen people and a whole bunch of different stuff and all our furniture and everything. We started in, I used to go to events in Lionsgate on the Greyhound bus from Bellingham and tote everything in backpacks and satchels to get up there and mooch rides and things. And so we've slowly gone from a very portable camp to a very not portable camp. Not without a van, but we really love it, and we love being able to share that space with anybody who comes by and wants to eat some cheese and hang out. And we try and make it as pretty and full of heraldry and color and medieval feeling as possible. So,
All right,
jump in with
slides.
some slides.
Yeah, so I think we're going to start with just some pictures of the most recent incarnation of camp. So, there we go. I believe this was a September Crown a few years ago. We generally try to do camp in a circular fashion. we have a day shade that sits in the center as our social space. And then we kind of circle the day shade with canvas pavilions. Let me find.
On those times when we've had somebody who camps and doesn't have a period tent, they are welcome as well. We just often find a way to tuck them kind of in between tents so that it doesn't, I'm trying to come up with a good word. It doesn't affect the medieval feeling of the camp as a whole, but we don't exclude people simply because they don't have a period tent. We do have a usual group of people that we camp with, and that, metamorphosizes over time. We add new people and people move away. This lovely oval tent in the foreground in this picture, those guys just moved off to Vermont. So we'll miss them, but especially looking back through all these pictures over the years, we've had a wide variety of people who've come and gone, but we have sort of a steady group of central people, and we very much run our camp as we like to call it an autonomous collective, to quote Monty Python, rather than sort of some households are very hierarchical, where there's a peer and all of their apprentices or squires or however, and there's kind of a head of the household. And there are others where there's very much a camp mom who, feeds everybody for the weekend. And our particular setup that works for all of us pretty well is more of an autonomous collective, where we've got everybody kind of pitches into their ability, and everyone brings their bedroom basically. And then we've got a few of us that have got the space to transport and the funds to purchase a second tent, provide the central dining hall and the kitchen tent and some of the other communal furniture and things like that. And that allows us to kind of include a lot of people.
Let's go.
Yeah,
Okay,
so this is our dining hall.
It is a Panther marquee. In fact, it is just the top of a Panther marquee. We just called Panther and says, hey, I'd like to buy a marquee without the walls. And they were very happy to do that. I think it's 14 by 18.
Something like that.
And
so if it's about 16 people sitting at tables at dinner time.
we should talk about tables.
Yeah, initially we started with a smaller group. And so we would kind of put the kitchen in one end of that tent. And then as our group got bigger, we needed more dining space. And somebody donated a little square tent. So now the kitchen is elsewhere, and this is just the dining hall. And so it's very much the central social space for the camp, and where we all hang out during the day and have food and snacks and sewing projects and whatever else is happening throughout the day. That's kind of our central hall.
I am going to flip to the next one because it actually shows the kitchen. So over time, we sort of grew from not really having a space for cooking to building a space for cooking into our own tent. And it speaks to when you're camping by yourself, you pretty much have to bring everything all the time. Like if you need it that weekend, you kind of have to either bring it or know somebody who you could borrow from or something. And so you end up bringing all the essentials, all the kitchen things, all the seating, all the tables, all the shade. And when you start camping with an established group,
you can divide those tasks a lot.
Exactly. The who brings what conversation changes a lot. Like suddenly, if you have 10 people camping together, you don't need 10 stoves. You never need 10 stoves. And so we ended up standardizing on, like, we use this kind of stoves with this kind of canister, so we don't end up with 10
fuels that don't work or things like
bottles of propane on stoves that use butane or something like that.
Does this scroll? No.
We also we went to a tent that sort of had a built-in space of shade for us.
We can talk about that when we get to the pictures of it.
Yeah, but I want to talk about the kitchen.
Okay.
Like this photo shows a few tents used as bedrooms, a shade used as a social space, and a shade used as a food preparation space.
So that's the one in the foreground, and it's a like 12-foot square, and it has walls for if it's particularly windy or rainy or sunny in annoying directions. And so, but most of the time we end up not putting those up because there's enough tents around the outside to kind of create that shelter. And it's our probably least attractive part of the camp because it tends to have, you know, coolers with cloths thrown over them and dirty dishes and things like that. But we try and keep it as tidy as we can. And our campmate, Baroness Spique, loves to bring flowers. Her mother has this amazing garden. And so she always brings cut flowers. So there's always a vase of flowers on every table, which contributes to it looking attractive, and was one of those things I'd never thought of taking to a camp event, but it always adds a lot.
And it wouldn't ever be something we would think of camping by ourselves, right? It's just delightful that everybody who comes has a thing that makes them happy. Yep. And so like, it turns out that Spica's thing is like flowers and making it look pretty and smell nice. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing
really
ever.
Cool. And I would never have thought of that, but she brings it.
And we also have plenty of pageantry in this shot. I love this shot because of all the pennants and banners.
Heraldry makes everything look more festive. There's a question up here about how to cultivate a group of folks to work towards an encampment like Fromage.
That's a great question.
That is a good question. Yeah, it's been very organic. Where we used to camp by ourselves, and we can still visit some of the tents.
Number one.
We've added people and just sort of found like-minded people, and we tend to kind of try people out a bit and like, sure, camp with us as a guest. We'll see how it goes. And then if everybody feels like, yeah, this is a good fit, then we'll be like, hey, you guys want to keep camping with us? And you know, some people kind of have their own thing going, and so they're like, yeah, I'll camp with you as a guest sometimes. And others are like, yes, I want to camp with you guys all the time. This is fun, you know. And so just sort of, I don't know, organically sort of finding your people.
It's deliberate as well. Like there's things
and
that
inviting them.
Yeah, there's things that we all really like. We all really aim for about the same level of, we want it to look not modern, but we're also not like super worried about the fact that there's a cooler in camp, or
wooden IKEA chairs are totally fine. You know, we don't really love having the Costco, you know,
cloth things.
Those cloth sling foldy up chairs that have the beer holder in the side and stuff. So if somebody shows up with one of those, it's like, here, we've got a spare wooden chair. But nobody's like, that's not a period design. You bought that at IKEA. It's fine, it's period, it feels medieval, it doesn't detract from the general feeling, we're happy. So that's kind of our level of authenticity, anti-modernness. It's kind of in the middle there.
And it's also super accessible stuff, right? Because we are not, we're not completely period. We have to fit it all in our vehicle at the end of the weekend. And so where trestle tables would just be so cool to have trestle tables, having
packed down very well.
Pack flat IKEA tables are actually a really good compromise.
And different people can bring them and we can line them all up and they match. So they're all the same height, they're all the same width. It makes a nice modular kind of setup. And
so it's really just sharing that level of desire for authenticity and not modern aesthetic with your other campmates is the way to avoid strife. And so finding
and we all enjoy eating good food.
Oh my God.
And we all enjoy just hanging out with each other. One of the things that we try to do at every event is sit down for dinner together. And sometimes that can be a bit of a shuffle, trying to work that around court and tournaments and everybody's different commitments. And every once in a while we'll end up with, you know, if somebody is being court herald and has to be at court for the entirety of it, we'll just put together a plate and take that over to her. But for the most part, we really make it a goal that at every event we sit down for dinner together. And that's just something we all enjoy. And so those kind of things where we kind of come up with what's important to us. And if we all agree on it, then it's going to be a good fit.
Talk about your tent.
So this is the very first tent that I built when I was just out of college.
Canvas.
It's canvas. It's sort of period-ish. It was my version of a Norse A-frame of the time. It's kind of what other people were doing around that time. And I never really had a Norse persona or anything, but it was something that I could build by myself. It was something I could sew at home on my home sewing machine. It was woodworking that I could manage, and it was something I could set up and take down by myself. And I could pack that thing into a bag, and I could ask somebody to transport the lumber for me, and I could get it to events without owning my own car. So those things were all important. The lumber is very, it's a bunch of 8-foot boards, and they're quite lightweight, and there's 9 pieces of wood. And so they bundle up into a thing about that big around, and I can say, can you put this on your roof, and I'll meet you at the event, and I'll have a tent.
Still going strong.
And yeah, so it worked really well as a one-person, starving student kind of era tent. I had this arrangement where I had my one-person mattress down the middle and my 2 little boxes on each side, and the little rug that I could stand on, and you could stand right here and get dressed and things in the morning, and you could sit on a little bench, and that was about all you could do in there. It was very compact. So when I started dating this guy and brought him to an event, I spent the whole time being like, don't stand there. So shortly thereafter, we built our larger 2-person tent, but this tent is still going strong. We gave it to one of our campmates that didn't have a period tent, and she's still using it. So that was a nice thing to be able to provide for somebody else as well.
Tent number 2.
Much larger.
That was overkill.
Kind of a reaction.
Yeah, I couldn't actually stand up in tent number 1 without canvas pressing on both my temples. And so we wanted to build something tall, and we did. And it was a bit tall.
It was a bit much. We had to carry a ladder with us because the way the walls are attached, you have to clip them on after the roof is set up, and it's 12 feet high in the center. So
we learned a lot.
It wasn't the most practical tent, but we built it ourselves. And we were camping with just the 2 of us at that point. We didn't really have a camp to share with. And so this tent was our bedroom, our kitchen, our storage space, our social space. It had to do everything. And so it was big, and but it had this little sitting area out front. And curiously, this canopy with its own poles is the freestanding canopy, and we still use that as sort of a backup shade. But, as you can see, we had a little table outside. We had a place where we could have our chairs and be social and invite people to come join us in our little canopy. There's an interior picture of it. That's the 1/2. So, I kind of had the bedroom half, and then it had the stuff half, and then it had the kitchen area out front. And it was great. It did what we needed it to do when we were camping by ourselves. But as we started camping with other people, we found it was a lot more than we needed. Isabella used to call it our bed and breakfast because we frequently would hang a curtain down the middle and have other people camp in the other half. So we were able to have a guest house sort of for people that didn't have tents, and that was kind of fun. But it was more than we needed.
Yeah, I would add that the bed that you see here was another sort of increase in comfort. I think we camped in this tent for several years without a bed.
Yeah, we had mattress on the floor thing.
And that was problematic in lots of comfort ways. And then Alfred helped me make the bed one
many years ago.
Yeah. And so like that, and it turns out that once you have the bed, you can put boxes under the bed, and suddenly your tent is so much less cluttered that you can do other things in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very slow progression from A-frame with no shade to tent with some shade to tent with amenities with some shade. And we gradually realized that we didn't, it was when we had this tent, we started camping regularly with the same set of people. And we came to the conclusion that we didn't have to provide everything. We no longer needed our tent to be everything for us. It
Yeah.
didn't need to be the cooking space. It didn't need to be the social space. It could just be the bedroom.
Yeah.
And
It didn't
that's,
need to be the house and the yard. It was just the bedroom.
and that's when we switched to the round tent.
Yeah.
Uh,
So we bought this one from some friends of ours that were downsizing and going to more of a one-person tent. And so there's kind of an arc where, oh dear, what was her name again? Oh, somebody had asked earlier about a one-person tent.
oh,
And anyway, so that's fine.
Okay.
So yeah, there's this kind of like, okay, I want more stuff. I want more stuff. Okay, I need different stuff. And then, somebody else was saying, oh, I want a smaller tent that I can set up by myself and transport by myself. And so she sold us her tent because we were saying we want something more historically accurate looking, and something that only needs to be a bedroom. So it didn't need to be quite so hard to set up. And this round tent we just love. It's quite large and sort of palatial. But again, that still allows us to be the extra stuff space.
right.
We have a friend who fences and doesn't camp. And so if he's usually staying in a hotel or something off site, he needs a place to put his fencing bag and his chair and his clothes in. And so he usually stashes them in here because we have space. And it's always nice to be able to provide that for somebody that needs it.
It's to answer the question in the chat, the round tent is an 18-foot Panther
Right.
pavilion. I think it's their largest round in the regular catalog.
Yeah. And a couple of our friends, you'll see in one of the group pictures, have the neck size down, which are also quite comfortable. But this thing's palatial. It's great.
And it really is just our bedroom at this point, although
and our storage space.
we stash a table, we keep coolers in it, we keep
Yep.
camp gear in it, we frequently have horse gear. We keep, heraldry supplies like trumpets up in the attic.
Yeah. So it's got plenty of room for a double bed and all the boxes you can want to pile in there. Yeah, the fun thing he was talking about the attic is that the spoke setup gives
I think that's the
you,
next picture, actually.
yeah, it gives you these bars up above. You can't put a lot of heavy things, but things like straw hats, things like our trumpets, things like, you can put a hanger with a dress if something's wet on it, if you're careful. You don't want to bow the stakes too much, and it will tip the tent a little if you put too much weight on one side. But it gives you this, I mean, it's already a vast tent, but it gives you extra storage space up above for those things that are always kind of in the way. You don't always have to just pile them on the bed, though obviously we do that too. The bagpipe is on there.
Yeah.
And this is some of the progression with our interior design of adding a thing. We try to kind of have a running list of, oh, it'd be nice to have this. Oh, it'd be nice to have that.
But it's been running for 20 years.
Yes.
So
So we've added the rugs. We got those off of eBay, these amazing wool rugs. Though the ones at the back are from the hardware store, stuff. But it's nice to have rugs on the floor. It feels good on your feet, and it doesn't crinkle like the ground tarp. And then we built these boxes. Guillaume took a class at an ITHRA in Shinnewood a very long time ago, Thornwood.
back when there was a
Back when
Shinnewood.
they were Shinnewood. And somebody had taught him how to make these boxes. And so we made a bunch of those for our clothes and our kitchen gear and our lanterns and stuff. And so they all transport in those, and they're uniform size, so they stack into the car really easily. And we've made a few others for gifts for friends because they're a really good size to put all your stuff in and still be able to lift. They're not too wide, so you can actually pick them up comfortably. So those are a nice piece of furniture. You can sit on them, you can stand on them. If you're short like me and need to hang the walls up, I can just move a box around the room and stand on it.
A bit of round tent advice. We have camped in a equally sized round tent that did not have detachable walls. Ours, we are delighted that the one we picked up used has detachable walls.
Yes, if you're looking at a round tent, it makes it 1,000 times easier to set up. If you can just set up the roof, get that all staked out, and then hang the walls up. Trying to hold the tent upright with all that extra weight of walls and also not be able to see the person that's helping you is
Chaos.
tremendously stressful. And it makes it so much heavier that it's a lot harder to hold that center pole up while you get things stable. Talking of setup.
Yeah, let's talk setup.
It's so much easier to set up than our old tent, but it does take 2 people.
It doesn't take a ladder.
It doesn't take a ladder. But it does take 2 people. It's pretty easy to set up with 2 people. If you have a third person for the actual raising the center pole moment, it's super easy. It's a lot of stakes. But it is, it's really wind resistant because of the round. And so it doesn't get ripped when it's windy out. It sheds water like crazy, which is great in Ontario. And yeah, it's a really efficient design. You can see why they used it for so long, just like this.
Yeah, it's on the tapestry behind us.
And it just has that wonderfully medieval look. So get the detachable walls, but round tents are awesome.
And there are a lot of tents
Yeah.
that come up used.
Yeah,
You can find used tents.
like us, there's a lot of like, I want this other kind of tent. This is working, but this would work better. And so if you keep the word out, if you're looking for a tent, there's one of my apprentices keeps buying tents. She's got so many tents that she has or has had that it just amazes me, because I'd always thought, I finally have a tent. This is great. This is going to be forever. And then, okay, I need a bigger tent. Okay. But I'm always sort of staggered at how many tents have gone through her possession. But she's just trying everything out. And
all
most
good.
of them she's gotten secondhand from somebody else and just keeps passing them around. So
I would say that
it's a thing.
one of the neat things about having a camp like this is the ability to enable people who, for whatever reason, can't either transport a tent or are only able to come to the event for a couple hours. Life happens,
Yep.
and not everybody gets to have the cargo carrying capacity to bring a period pavilion, and
Or the
not everybody
time.
can afford it, and not
Mhm.
everybody has the time. And so to be able to create a space where people do feel welcome to come and day trip to the event, have a landing space, have a place to stash their gear where it's, feels secure,
Mhm.
and are able to join us for afternoon socializing and dinner and whatnot is really one of my favorite things
Mhm.
about, putting the camp up.
Yeah.
And we only bring 2 pieces of canvas, right? We bring our tent and we bring the center day shape.
Yeah.
And Joe's on the call. He brings the kitchen tent
And their tent
as well as-
bedroom.
yeah.
Um,
And everybody brings their own bedroom
Yeah.
and about as much food as they are planning on eating. And there's always extra food. For a long time, can I talk about the Dinty Moore soup can? So then a long time in our kitchen box, there was this can of Dinty Moore soup, which was if nothing else, I'll have a can of soup.
Yeah, I can
Because-
heat this up and I won't starve. But
Um,
as our camp has improved and we've gotten more reliable, I finally stopped carrying that thing around because I felt like, okay, I can count on, even if we're not bringing everything, I don't need this emergency meal always to be in my possession. Because we have this wonderful cooperative group of people. And
Yeah.
and now it's kind of a joke of like, do we need more cheese? No, we're gonna have so much cheese.
We totally need more
We
cheese.
always have too much cheese. Well, just in case, we're gonna get more cheese. So
yeah.
yeah, it's nice to be able to feed people. And if somebody, can only get childcare for an afternoon, they can show up at the event for 3 hours and they
Yeah.
have a place to sit and they can participate in, dinner or just the lunch and social time. And our camp can support that, which is really lovely.
Lighting. Let's talk lighting. Okay, on the left of your screen, you
That's tent number
see
2.
tent number 2 with some store-bought lighting that worked. So
Yeah.
the top, we are hanging Ikea lanterns, and I think the lanterns on the table.
Yeah, the 2 on the table there came from like Joanne Fabrics or someplace like that. They were kind of one of those kitschy garden stuff.
And they were
um,
lovely. They
And you
threw
put a tea light in there and
pretty
they make light.
shapes. What they didn't throw was a lot of light.
Yep.
And so we eventually moved to the chandeliers that some of our blacksmith friends sell on the right. And we ended up with, I think, 3 or 4 sets of those
Yeah.
purchased by various members of camp.
So we could hang them up in the dining hall. We could hang them up in the kitchen tent. We could hang them up in our tent. And they are little glass flower pot shaped things that sit in iron grabby things. And they're like a little forked end to the thing that the candle cup sits in. And there's little votive candles in there, and it just holds a bunch of candles. And it's super simple. And again, it's perioid. You know, it's not necessarily an authentic research design, but it's fine.
And pro tip on votives, you can buy boxes of votives in bulk online
That don't smell.
that don't smell and are way cheaper than getting them at the drugstore the
Yeah.
day before the event, where you're paying a lot. So
yeah, get them by the box. They're great. If a candle tips over, we've had one or two of them break the glass because it got too hot because the flame was right up against it. You know, so we're glad we have wool rugs where you get wax all over the rug, but it didn't light on fire.
it
And
is a
there is that
consideration.
hazard of when we have a burn ban, we don't have light.
Yeah.
And they're not an enclosed flame like the little Ikea lanterns on the left.
And so it turned out that all of the chandeliers that we purchased for use in the day shade in particular became not useful because either we were having windy events or
Right.
we were having events with burn bans where we
Either
couldn't
way,
put
they
the lights
didn't
up.
work.
And so we moved to a different model. On the left, you see a picture from King Renee's tournament book where they were so kind to draw out the chandelier that they used for the awards ceremony at the end of the tournament.
And curiously, there are a couple of other manuscript illustrations from around this time period that have really, really similar looking chandeliers. And it's kind of neat. It's super simple little wood X with little candle cups on it, and it hangs from the ceiling on a rope. And so we found, again, at IKEA, these little glass dishes that are very similar shape.
They're votive holders. Yeah.
And they're the
Did you
ones that
pull one in?
the ones in King Renee are probably opaque,
Oh, yeah.
and these are transparent, but they look pretty good. And so we bought a whole flat of those, and we've made a few of these chandeliers. And what these hold are homemade battery candles. So they look pretty much like a historic. This is the base of the thing. They look pretty much like a historic chandelier, so it doesn't feel like you've got a Coleman lantern out there hissing and making a supernova. But they
No lantern.
aren't going to light anything on fire, and it's not going to be a hazard if they blow over, and also you don't have to change them all the time.
Yeah, they last a
We
weekend.
use these little LED light strips, and so you actually can leave it on for the whole weekend and even forget to turn them on and have them still work the next event a month later.
2 weeks about.
2 weeks. But the battery life is really good, is what I'm saying. And they make a pretty nice light. And
the LED votives are also a great option. The
Yeah.
price of those
the
has
ones with
really
the
come
switch on the
down.
bottom.
There's something about having the right color of light in a camp at night
So it feels like
that
firelight.
just warms the heart. And so be picky about the colors that your light throws.
Yeah, if it's that harsh white blue light, it just feels so modern. And if it feels like firelight, it makes everything so warm and cozy and welcoming. So that's one of our aesthetic pickinesses.
Do you want to talk about fire? I can go back to the fire
Yeah,
pit slide.
fire's good.
All right, fire. Oh,
That's a
no,
real fire.
Can't go back.
That's fine. That one's fine.
Yeah,
Is it not working?
it's not going back. I'm
Oh,
just
I
gonna
see.
flip back.
Oh, it went back over here, but not
Yeah,
okay.
2 screens.
So yeah, this is our tent in the background, a little bit of our
Oh, you can see the candles on the left. or
communal
the-
shade on the left,
chandeliers.
yeah. And then one of our little X chairs that we picked up at a large interkingdom war, and 2 years later managed to ship them home to us.
Mhm.
And our little fire pit. And that's just one of those Turkish copper braziers that we built extra long legs for, so that it's 18 inches off the ground for all those burn ban times.
Or burn restrictive at least.
Burn restriction times. Yeah, when it's burn ban, obviously it doesn't work.
Um,
But it is so nice to be able to have a campfire for people to sit around. We really enjoy singing in the evenings, and there's something about the fire and gathering around a fire that is so much more conducive to that even than gathering around a table.
And sight lines are really key. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you have the ability to create maybe just one half of where, like, you're sitting in camp, and if I look north, it looks period and beautiful. And if I look south, there's 10 biffies and a street light. And so it's like, great, let's set our camp up so that we're looking north.
Yep.
Put the period pavilions there, and if we have some folks that are camping in dome tents, like be decisive in sort of how we arrange things so that there is an opportunity to, have a direction where you would want to take a picture,
Right.
even if there's a direction where maybe you
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah, there might be something unattractive, but from here, everything looks really good. This was a nice place in that we had the lovely moonlight and trees all around, and it was great. But
Do you want to talk about, I'm going to go back to the very beginning of the slideshow, and we don't have it. I was going to say sanitation.
oh,
Yeah,
yes, one of the things that we discovered when,
horses.
things I had always adapted to going to events are, like, where do you wash your hands? But when we started bringing horses to events, you spend an hour mucking poop out of a paddock, and then you go groom your horse and you're just dirty. You're just covered in dirt and dust. And it just started to be a lot more important. We'd be able to actually wash your hands. Hand sanitizer doesn't do a lot of good when you've just got that much dirt on you. So we started bringing what we call our wash stand, and it's just the one of the porch of the tent has the table at least.
All right.
This little square, actually that is the wash stand. Okay.
Sorry, which slide?
Oh, the one on the porch of the tent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wherever that is in the slideshow, it's just a
There.
little small IKEA table. It's
There it
square.
is.
And I bought a bowl from one potter and a large pitcher from another potter. So they're, beautiful, historically accurate dishes, but we just keep the pitcher full of water. The bowl is what you pour into. So you hold your hands over the bowl and pour water. And we have a little soap dish and a little nail brush, and anybody who's using the camp can come by, wash their hands, dump out the dirty water. And there's a towel there to dry your hands. And so we actually can get to where you actually feel clean. And that's been a really nice addition to camp, to just be able to really actually wash your hands with soap and water. So
And that was one of those things where we had a realization, like, hey, we can add this.
yeah,
We think
We've
of it
got
as
room
a
to carry it.
service.
Mhm.
Like, here is the wash station. You all don't need to bring a wash station because there is one in camp.
And it's also nice, given that we all eat together, to feel like, yeah, everybody actually could wash their hands and we're not
Speaking
spreading
of
germs
eating,
about.
I'm going to go to the very end of the slideshow because there's a lovely shot of a full table.
This is kind of the heart of the feeling of our camp that we like to create, is just have this, come on by, have a snack, have some cheese, have some crackers, have some homemade chev that Countess Elizabeth made in the foreground there.
One of my exes in them.
And just a welcoming space. That's one of the things that we've always wanted to be able to create, and been really happy with how it's come together.
One thing with standardizing on the IKEA tables is that we bring some, speaking NGO bring some, I think some other folks.
Kirsten, I think, has one.
Exactly.
Eleanor has
And
some.
so when it's time to sit down as a camp at table, all of the tables are the same height, and that
Yeah.
is really useful.
And so everybody can just actually sit down at the table. We usually do a sideboard for serving and things. And so we actually have space. They're not huge tables, but everybody has a space for their dishes and their food, and we can sit down and just eat. And it's a really nice social focus for the weekend. Is cheese fondue? There's a question, is cheese fondue, period? There's at least a traditional dish, if not, I'm not sure if it's documentable. I should know. My Laurel and Marie is a food Laurel.
Wow.
But there's a traditional dish called raclette that is yummy aromatic cheese melted over a fire and eaten with little potatoes and bread and cornichon pickles and other
Everything.
delightful things. And we like to recreate that as sort of our late night snack. We have a little frying pan that we'll heat up the cheese in, and then everybody just dips things in it. It's delightful, sort of fondue-ish.
Melty cheese is
Yeah,
delicious.
melty cheese on stuff is great. Yeah.
All right, questions. How can we help by answering questions?
Oh yes, totally agree on the hand sanitizer. It doesn't clean, it just sanitizes. Soap is better.
Midnight baking. That sounds
Oh,
great.
midnight bacon is also a brilliant idea.
This is a picture
Could
of
be
camp.
combined with midnight cheese.
How many years from start to now?
Oh, well, what year? I probably built that little A-frame tent in about 94.
Six,
Um,
20,
Oh, what are
26
the
years?
things?
27 years?
I don't know. I can't. It'll probably be disturbing if I add that all up. So, what are some of the things on your to-do list or your wish list?
Ooh. Okay,
There's always
so
some.
right now my to-do list involves redoing some of our pageantry, because it turns out that silk pennants degrade after about 10 years and start flapping themselves into oblivion.
Right.
so-
So it's time for new silk banners.
Yeah.
Our tent over there on the right has a little, we should probably talk about the finial.
I think
So
I
there's,
have a
so there's a big gold gilded wooden ball on top of it. And then there's a little pennant on top of that to kind of create this look like on the thing. Oh, you can't quite see that. There's a ball and then there's a little small pennant. And the pennant used to be red. And
There
now
it
it's
is.
kind of a washed
Pennant.
out rose color. And so it's time for a new pennant. And also the day shade, the central dining hall tent got a little rip in it because we left it up in our yard for about a week or two. And it started raining, and so it got very tight,
There
and
was
we
a
didn't
storm.
catch it in time. So
Yeah.
it's got a little tear that needs to be repaired.
I would say that as camp has grown and expanded, there are never enough tables. Like there just isn't enough table space, because there's this rule of the universe that if there is a table, something will get put on the table. And then there is no more table space because the table is full of things. And they're usually delightful thing. And it's the best problem in the world to have is that all your tables are full of delightful things and you have no table space. But I would say that sideboards, having some space where, when we have a lot of people sitting down for dinner, we
You run
usually
out of-
run out of table space.
And you
so
run
having
out
some
of place to
sideboards-
put like a large pot of food
Yeah.
on the table. So it needs to go somewhere else so that everybody's got a space for their plate. Enzio points out more chair cushions. Yes. The last time we all got
Yeah.
together, we realized we're getting older and sitting on hard wooden chairs is tiresome. And we enjoy our lounging about time. So we end up sitting on our chairs a lot. Verena Spica is a upholsterer. And so she's made these awesome cushions for her own chairs.
which
And
we
somehow
sit on
everyone else
every
ends
chance
up
we get.
sitting on her chairs because they're comfortable.
They're super
So
comfy.
it's time for everybody to have their own heraldically colored appropriate thing. Do you have anything that you hang your clothes from, or do you store them in chests? I mostly store stuff in chests. When we went to Penzic, the one time we went to Penzic, we stayed in a round tent, very much like ours, though with attached walls, terrible.
But we didn't have to put it up. It was great.
So hot. That event is so humid that we ended up with a lot of our clothes hanging over those spokes of the tent because you just
It's the only way to
get
get it
damp.
dry.
It would rain and then it would never dry. And so a lot, if you have things that get wet, you can hang them up over the spokes. But then you're also kind of walking through them all the time. So I prefer to keep things folded up in the boxes. If there's table space, a scribe will borrow it. Yeah, true enough.
There is an interesting question here about what do you think about guy rope flagging?
Mhm.
We don't generally flag our ropes, but what we do have
have.
is we have these little dog bones, which we use for tensioning.
The little sliders.
And they are big enough that they frequently make it easier to
They
see the
help
rope
with
as
visual. It's also, there are so many ropes. This tent has 20 ropes around the perimeter. And then our dining hall has a bunch more. We used to have little pieces of white stuff tied to the ropes, and over time it has disappeared. But we've also found less of a need for it. I think part of it for me is that I've been in the SCA for so long that I kind of have an almost instinctive, there's probably a rope here instinct, which
Yep.
doesn't help somebody who doesn't have that instinct. But our camp kind of is a lot of period tents and a lot of lines. And I think we've all just found that we're used to it enough that we haven't stayed on top of keeping flags on lines. It's something we should consider, because it is a safety thing, and it does help people who aren't as used to wandering through mazes of ropes.
It does help
We do try to
to
leave
be-
paths as well.
yeah.
When we set up, we try and think about traffic patterns a lot. It's
having
kind
a
of,
deliberate entrance and exit to camp helps with not creating drunk traps.
yeah. And it also helps with people kind of thinking about traffic patterns is one of our kind of setup things. So thinking about where are the roads on the camp, on the event, and where do we want our entrance to be? And we like to kind of direct people to the dining hall, so they don't sort of wander through the kitchen or come and go in unexpected places that feel more like somebody's personal space. So yeah, we tend to have an open channel to the dining hall at least. And either pack the tents so closely that the lines are crossed and you just don't go there, or space them out enough that there's an actual path. So some of it's about planning and setup and thinking about our
I have
traffic.
an anecdote to share on pre-event planning. So it never works, in my experience, to draw out a map of what your camp will look like when you get to the event, because you get there and there's like 3 giant trees in the middle of where your camp is. And it's it's a 75 by 75 space. And so if you, like, we used to do this thing where it's like, okay, your tent's going to go here and here. And then we'd show up and there'd be a tree right where my tent was supposed to go.
Or
And so
we'd
we
have
just, like,
everything mapped out
gave
for
up.
like, okay, your footprint is 25 feet and yours is 10 by 20 and yours is 15 and yours is 8 by 10. And we'd have it all mapped out on graph paper, and you'd get there and they'd give us like this weird long trapezoid. You're like,
It
so we don't-
never works.
it never survived, or there's a hole in the middle or whatever, and so it's good to know how much space your camp needs, but it's often an exercise in futility to try and codify it too much before you learn what the space you actually have to work with looks like. Every once in a while we get one of those fairgrounds where it's like perfect flat rectangles with no obstacles, and it's great, but usually those plans don't survive into reality when you show up and see what you're getting.
There's a question here. How
yeah.
do you transport everything?
We have what I think is the best ever tournament vehicle. It's a Volkswagen Eurovan, which is a box. It is an absolute rectangle. A lot of minivans, the walls slope in so things get smaller, or the seats only fold down. Everything comes out of this thing, and it's just an 8 foot by like 3.5 foot, 4 foot. I don't know how wide it is.
It's a box.
And so we have those wooden boxes that we keep all of our kitchen stuff and our tent sort of accoutrement and our clothing in. And so we have 8 of those boxes, something like that. And so we start by just stacking those, and they make this nice rectangular space. And then we have the basket things that we got from Ikea, because we love Ikea and their stuff, and that are also rectangular. And so some of the more odd shaped heavy things go in those, and those go in. And so we sort of build this Lego thing of rectangular boxes, and then the odd shaped things like the fire pit and the squashy duffel with the dining hall canvas and things like that, all go in the odd spaces, and the lumber goes down the middle, and it's the easiest thing to load, and it's so nice.
But I want to add that we don't transport everything. We
Yes.
transport our camp, and we transport some of the shared infrastructure, like the wash station, like the dining fly.
Yep.
Some of the tables and chairs. Like I prefer, there's only 2 of us, but we do bring like 4 to 6 folding chairs so that people who come and visit have a nice place to sit. There are other people in camp who transport things, including their own spaces and also some of the common spaces. So a lot of our lumber will break down. We used to carry 12-foot boards. If you see the old tent, like those were 2x6s.
Yeah,
we
they
had
were
roof racks.
heavy and big.
We are now at the point where we no longer need a roof rack on the Eurovan. It came off because our boards are not longer than 8 feet. And so they all fit down the middle. But I would say, like, we make very explicit choices about what to bring and what not to bring to any event. And that includes, we will bring a fire pit, but there might be someone else in camp who will bring firewood, things like that.
Yeah, so we divide up the tasks a fair bit. Somebody asked about transporting canvas when you have a truck but no trailer. I'm assuming that's a weather, I'm not sure if that's a length of lumber issue or a weather open truck bed issue. But I know that 2 of the people in our camp put their canvas and then their stake bags and their rope bags all into a plastic bin with a latching lid. And that helps keep it dry if you're out in the weather. It is important to make sure it's dry when it goes back in or you get mildew, but that's a good way to sort of protect things from the weather if you just have an open truck. Yeah.
And when you do go to interkingdom events that are a long distance away, like we would drive down to Estrella, then security becomes more of an issue because you're going to overnight somewhere. And
having things stolen out of trucks is not good. We actually, when we used to take our long boards, they had like a mortise and tenon hole in the ends of them. And we actually got like one of those cable bike locks because we were staying overnight at motels on the way down and back. And so we ran that bike cable and padlocked the boards to each other and to the roof rack, just in case we didn't want to lose our tent lumber. So that was a strange thing to have to problem solve, but
there was another
it added peace of mind.
About walking path lighting ideas. I would, if I were going to do a walking path light, I would probably get a package of LED candles.
Yeah, something non-fire.
And then, look at maybe what sort of shape could they go in that looked
nice.
Whatever the sort of aesthetic I was going for. But some of those
garden things that are like a stake with a hook on the top that you can hang a little lantern off of look really cute.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned something about light colors, and it's not the point they were making, but one thing that I was going to mention is the canopy. If you have the pictures of the canopy, this one.
Oops, sorry.
If you're at an event at like fairgrounds where they leave field lights on all night.
Which canopy?
Or this one.
Oh, the blue one.
Or this one is the one I like better, but or you're wanting to sleep in a little in the morning. This white canvas in the picture on the right, for example, gets very bright in the early morning when the sun comes up, or if there's a light that's on. And I mostly made this canopy because I thought it looked very posh, and I found this cool fabric and everything. And I've always loved that picture of Isabeau de Bavière with Christine de Pizan, and they're presenting her with a book, and she's sitting and sort of holding court on this bed with this gorgeous embroidered bedspread and this beautiful drape down the back. And I was like, I want something like that. And so I made it, and we tried it out, and it keeps the brightness from being so bright at you in the morning, or, like, I think it was the Toppenish Fairground that always had these lights that they would leave on all night, and it was so hard to sleep. But this sort of functions to make that bright white canvas reflecting all that light. It just cuts the glare a bit, and it's so nice for being able to just sleep a little longer. So, as long as you don't have a first in the morning meeting, you can just have a little more dark. So it's functional as well as pretty. And it ties into the wall clips on the backside, and then just there's strings that just tie around the tent spokes for the front part. And so it's just those four corners attach it, and it looks very regal, I think.
And we had the bed for years before we did that.
It was on my to-do list for quite a while. And then one year I was like, oh yeah, this is good fabric. And so we made that. And as you can see on the left, there's that ugly striped bedspread that I got at, the Indian import store when I was in college and dragged around for years. And it helps keep the dew off because it's cotton. And so it sort of soaks that dew up if it's damp out.
The candles help with
But
that.
then I was looking at that painting of Christina Pizan again, and I was like, oh, red velvet. So I got a hold of this red upholstery velvet somewhere and made myself a bedspread. So now it's finished. The bed is all set now. Looks the way I want it to. So just keep adding a little something every year, some new thing that makes it feel a little more right.
Enzio from our camp is here. Did you want to add anything? I'm going to put you on the spot. You can just say no if you want.
No, you guys have covered it nicely.
Yay.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome camp.
More questions?
And yeah.
I think that 20 years or 26 years, if I was going to do the math, it really isn't we suddenly had an amazing camp. It was we added piece by piece, and other members of camp added piece by piece. And
I definitely remember being intimidated by those beautiful camps that I would see and think, oh, I could never afford a canvas tent, much less like all that stuff and wooden furniture. And how do you even take that anywhere? And it's like, but you start small, you start with what you can do, and then you get a chair, and maybe you get a little side table, and just keep building, keep adding. And then at some point you scale back a little because you're tired of dragging all that stuff around. And then, it's a process. Has anyone tried those ruggable rugs? I haven't.
The ones in the back on the photo on the left, those are hardware store rugs.
So they're like indoor, outdoor, put it on your patio kind of Persian looking rugs. The one in the front is actually a Persian rug that we got through an eBay vendor that was an amazing price. But we grabbed that as, right, with much excitement. And it is the real wool rug is such a lovely thing. It feels really nice, and it doesn't mildew. It's been great. It rolls up and transports. It's heavy.
It is heavy. It takes two of us to put that in and out.
Definitely, we each take an end, and we have a system for getting it in the car. But it's really nice, and it adds a very nice posh touch to the sort of entryway of the tent. So if somebody comes in to visit, they get to have that feeling of hospitality and a nice place to stand. And
it's
all nice. We love it. But,
yeah,
just one piece at a time. Yes, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Exactly. Keep building it. So well, I hope if whenever we get to have camping events with everybody there again, look for the big shiny gold ball
solid
on
gold
top of the
ball.
big round tent. Come by and have a visit. Enjoy some cheese.
One more question's popped up in the chat there for you.
Oh, yeah.
Canvas tent is taking the blowing to dry it.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, I feel you.
That's a thing. It definitely used to stress me out so much when it starts raining on Sunday morning and you're like, no, I don't want to transport wet canvas.
All right, so
Um,
let's start with what we
yeah.
did originally. So we've absolutely done the like all the little things in the
we
living
had
room with
set up
fans.
our couch and our camp tables in rows, and so we had the canvas sort of draped up and over those, trying to get it dry with box fans and things like that.
And then
Later in our basement in our house, we had kind of a long, narrow space, and we put up eye bolts and hooks in the ceiling and ran rope across so we could hang the canvas over that. And so it hung up in the basement from the ceiling, and that took
Kind of
some of the
folded.
stress off because we were able to like actually get it hung up. It was not fun, and you had to like squeeze past wet canvas to get anywhere in the basement. But that was a sort of rigging system where we had kind of a clothesline like thing that we could clip it to and hang it up. And that helped get things dry. We've recently moved to a 5-acre farm, and so now we're the drying place. So we
offer,
have
drying
either you
services.
can set it up in the pasture and just let it sun dry if we've got good weather, or we've got a canopy thing off one side of our shop that is a carport type of thing. And so we put, again, with the eye bolts, we love eye bolts, put those into the beams, and so you can hang your tent up from this 15-foot ceiling, and so you can actually hang things out flat there, and now it's quite convenient. But it's definitely what canvas is a thing.
And that's become another service for the camp.
Yeah,
as
so
well,
if
that
anybody's canvas got wet, come on over, hang it up, we can get it dry. Is another
yeah,
service we can provide to our local folks.
because that's super stressful to go home with a soaked canvas.
Wet canvas is the worst. So yeah.
So here's
Oh,
a-
is this your tent? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I spent 4 days out on the west coast of the island in the rain. We had one
Yep.
sunny day, but my little tiny apartment, and I don't know anybody with a yard. I just thought it would amuse you
Yeah.
to see that.
Oh, it breaks my heart.
Been
I know
there.
how awful that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So less of
there.
a question and more of a discussion. I was having a chat with Sir Antonio, who says hello, by the way.
Hi.
Joey.
Sorry he couldn't make it today.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how his first experience when he went out to Pensick was a lot of fenced off encampments.
Yeah, that's
oh,
a thing.
yeah.
And so
Pen-
I was
yeah.
curious where you see things going here in Ontario in terms
It's an
of
interesting.
getting people to be welcome to
Yeah.
wander into people's encampments, right? Because you've talked a little bit about making sure that the walking path leads to the dining canopy for you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and making sure that you've kind of cordoned off different spaces that can kind of feel personal. Do you find you have a lot of visitors who are just kind of wandering through? How do you see that aspect of community building?
Yeah.
What a great question.
Every once in a while, we've ended up in a location that ended up being kind of a highway. And so you get people kind of like cutting through. And it's one of those things where you can kind of be annoyed by it, or you can take a step back and go, well, they're all trying to get from here to here. And I guess we set up in such a way that it looks like a throughway. And so people get halfway into camp before they kind of realize they're in your living room. And then they usually just kind of hustle on through. And so it's like, yeah, I can't really fault somebody for trying to get where they're trying to go. And so I think we've just kind of taken that and been a little more conscious about, making our arc, where it's like, these are all the bedrooms, and it'd be nice if people weren't kind of stumbling through right next to on top of them. But this is our public space. And, the kitchen isn't the prettiest part of camp. So let's put it where they're walking into the welcoming space and the place where we kind of want to entertain guests, and make it, like when you set up the tent so that the ropes kind of cross, people aren't likely to choose that path if you kind of pack things in close enough that there's an easy path and a not easy path. They're probably going to take the easy path. So some of that's just planning out your traffic patterns and looking at how the whole event is set up and how you fall in it.
Let's talk about the interkingdom anthropology thing, because
Yeah,
yes,
Pensick is fascinating
wow, it's different.
because there's a whole different culture, and it is so structurally packed in where people have very defined spaces that they're allowed to camp in. and they put their tent so much closer together than on tier does, because we've usually got a fair bit of space and we're used to our elbow room. And they're like, well, this is your spot. Whoever wants to camp with you fits in this spot, and that's all you get. So there's a lot of really close packed, but there's also the things of like these kind of households where they put a wall all the way around it. And it's very odd, and it's unfamiliar, but it's also like what they do out there. So I don't love it. I'd rather set up a welcoming camp that people feel like they can come in and, you know, if we're sitting around playing music, we'd love to have more people come sit around and play music. This is great. You know, so we don't want to be like somebody has to ask if they can come in. We'd like them to feel like they can. But we also tend to plan our traffic patterns so they're walking into where we want them to walk into. So I guess, yeah, I don't like the walls,
I
but
just like the walls.
it's totally how
or
they do it there.
barriers.
So it's
Like,
just a
and
different-
also that is a whole bunch of
that's a
stuff
lot of stuff to
that
bring.
you're gonna have to bring and set up. And like, okay, maybe it makes sense if you're gonna leave it set up for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to pound a bunch of extra
Yeah.
poles in the ground just to be,
Yeah.
you know, stay outy.
But they also have the same spots every year. So I guess if you had your like perfectly period camp and your neighbors have the beer cans everywhere, or the, you know,
We did stay in the
other
bog.
very different theme, you might say, okay, well, let's put a barrier up on that side so that we can kind of create our aesthetic over here and they can have their aesthetic over there. You know, I could see where you'd start to adapt to the neighborhood that you're in every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like having a more open, welcoming space.
And so there is a culture of trust in
Yeah.
Ontario as well. Like we assume that our neighbors are trustworthy and here to have fun, etc. And it would, in my opinion, it would be a shame to lose that.
And we kind of have neighbors watch out for neighbors too, which I've noticed doesn't happen in every kingdom, which shocked me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's that. If somebody was snooping around in my tent and it's behind a wall, then they would know. So there's sort of a security and openness in a way.
Mhm.
What are you doing? That's not your tent. But yeah, I mean, I can't really fault them for doing what they do. I just don't quite understand it. We've only been the one time, but I was surprised at how much walls and barriers there were and how much you kind of had to like ask to be admitted to some of the camp areas. That was different.
Fun, but different.
Yeah, it was interesting.
You had a top 3 items, small items that you could use to spruce up your camp. What would they be?
Ooh.
Oh, more lighting, more serving dishes is one of those things that we often find we're in a little bit short supply. Speaky brings a lot of them, but we often find that it's like, oh, there's a big dish. What do we put it on? Because that's one of those things that, again, is kind of more of a communal thing. You don't necessarily need a giant platter if you're just feeding yourself and your partner, you know, or a small group. But then when we've got, you know, 15 people having dinner, then you start ending up with large quantities of any particular dish. And so serving dishes, we actually bought a really beautiful one from Rennick Tyne at Ontario West for last time we went. That is, I'm so excited about it. It's got this beautiful big
the
antelope, and it's this
Derby
15th
ibex.
century, yeah, 15th century replica plate, and it's quite lovely. And it's like, yeah, I finally have a good serving platter. So that's one of those. Serving dishes is one of those things.
I would, your first instinct, I will agree with, which is lighting.
Lighting.
That like a lot of the event is at night.
Yeah.
And
The fun part.
what we interestingly saw is when we added the big shade to the camp and started lighting it, the social circle shifted from the fireside to under the shade. And it was directly proportional to how good our lighting was. So people are attracted to light.
We're
And
all
so,
moths.
yeah,
But that big white side sloping, the roof slopes down on all 4 sides on the dining hall canopy, which reflects the light back, and it also protects the candles from wind. So even when we were using real candles up in there, it was kind of up in this pyramid shape. And so it kept them from blowing out all the time. When we just had a shed roof canvas, the candles would blow out all the time. And so we never really had very good light in there. And when we started having that white roof to reflect all that light back and candles that would stay lit, it definitely drew people like moths to that social space. And then it kind of expanded our ability to, rather than only be gathered around the fire, we also had this kind of secondary social space that sprung into existence. So yeah, lighting makes a big difference. And if you're wandering around camp and you sort of look into a camp, and you think, oh, what's going on over there? And you can see, you might go check it out. If you can't really see what's going on over there, you might not feel like you want to plunge into their space and find out a bit late that it wasn't quite what you were hoping for or whatever, so it helps with the social
I would
dynamic.
say the third thing, because you asked for three, would be a nice folding wooden chair.
Yep.
Because tables you can cover with tablecloths. And so like you can hide a lot with a tablecloth, but you can't really cover a chair in a way that makes it look like you're hiding what's under the cover of the chair. Like or rather that is the result of covering a chair. It's like, I have an ugly chair, I covered it. And so like there are some brilliant wooden folding chairs that pack flat, that are light, that can be found at thrift stores, and like yard furniture is a perfectly reasonable wooden folding chair. And I feel like they're so present in camps that replacing like a cloth Costco chair with a wooden chair is a really great option.
Yeah, definitely.
Somebody had mentioned way further back in the chat that they talk about the 10-foot rule. Like if it looks medieval-ish, about 10 feet away, that's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
definitely like in the kitchen, since it's so open, and we do usually have a few coolers out there. We just have a lot of pieces of cloth that we just keep draped over them.
Yeah.
And it means that when you're walking by 10 feet away, it doesn't look like, oh, nice, big red cooler. It looks like some fabric and things.
Now,
So it helps with the feel.
we also tend to keep our cooler inside our tent. And part of that is we have plenty of space for it. It's in the shade, it lasts longer. But it also, like, when you're maybe specializing on meals, instead of using it for every meal, you can pull it out of the tent for the meal that you are cooking for people and then put it back in the tent. It doesn't have to be out in the open.
Okay, so I've got a personal question here. I know there's a few of us who use solar power out in the field. Do you have any good ideas, or have you thought about how to hide the solar panels in a way that makes it a little more medieval?
The only solar we have is a
Wow.
small like phone charger that's only about this big. So we just sort of like put it someplace unobtrusive.
I'm asking because
But yeah, like an actual solar panel. How would you
Yeah.
set that up?
he bought one of the 12-volt fridge freezers, and so having ice cream and freshly made continual sources of ice on site
That's
is
brilliant.
mind-blowing. But of course, trying to hide the solar panel.
Yeah.
I
How big is it?
It comes in two pieces, but it's fairly large. Like we're talking 2 feet by 3 or 4 feet.
wow.
Yeah.
Um,
Is it freestanding or does it lean on something?
It can be freestanding, yeah.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, the efficiency of the solar panel, because we have solar here, and so I thought a lot about this. It really, you're gonna want to put it at the place where you're going to generate the most power.
Yeah.
And so, like, depending on how long your cord is, maybe separating it from camp so that it is in an advantageous place for actual power generation. Like if you look at the picture here that we're projecting, there's a wall tent. It's actually Enzio's tent in the front. And
On the
like
left.
you could, if the tent were situated towards the south, you could possibly lean it up against the lower parts, and I don't think the ropes would make very much difference. But boy.
But yeah,
I mean,
making it invisible, it's definitely going to be a modern looking thing,
it's not going to be invisible, but it's still cool.
but planning it so that it's on the outer part means it's going to get less shade. And, you know, but yeah, it's going to inherently need to be south facing to do its job. So
Yeah.
it's going to limit.
And I think
Where
it
it can
comes
be.
down to sight lines,
Yeah.
right? If your solar panels are facing south, then set up your camp so that when you're all sitting at table, you're not looking straight at solar panels.
Yeah.
You're looking at trees or something lovely.
Cool.
Somebody
curious.
suggests portable holes.
Yeah, portable holes are wicker frame on 3 of the sides to kind of make it look just a little bit more
Yeah.
medieval as opposed to aluminum sided.
Yeah.
Favorite easy camp meals.
Favorite what?
Easy camp meals.
One of our go-to dinners is sort of a Mediterranean kebab thing. And so we do like
so
a
good.
marinated chicken and marinated lamb cubes. And what we started doing, because handling raw meat at events means you've got to clean up biohazard. So we started doing, we'd put them on the skewers, we'd make the marinade and put the meat on the skewers at home, put it in a seal a meal kind of bag, and then freeze it, like seal it into its bag and freeze it. So all you have to do at the event is cut it off, dump the whole thing out onto a tray and put them on the fire. So you barely have to touch it. And then you just put them on the fire and grill it up. And then usually there's like couscous, and then anybody who's coming can contribute stuff like feta and olives and pita bread and easy stuff to bring and just purchase and bring. You know, or if somebody's feeling adventurous, they can make hummus or, you know, any of the cucumber salads, and sort of, it's got a broad range of sort of Mediterranean side dishes that everybody can contribute, and you end up with enough food for everybody. Because really the meat is the only commitment, the only challenge. So that's one of our go-to meals. Our Friday night thing is often like some bratwurst and some buns and some cheese. So you can just like set up your camp, throw some things on a fire and eat. And so really easy.
I would say our other go-to for meals is the sausage and pottage recipe, which I
Oh,
think is
yeah.
in one of the Madrona Culinary Guild pamphlets.
It's like apples and sausage and onion, and it's just made up into this big stew, and you can just kind of
Delicious.
double it or triple it easily. And it's a very hearty, easy dish with some bread, and you can dip bread in the sauce, and then you feel
And it's
hearty and fed.
documented. Super fun.
Yeah, and that one's actually a period recipe. Yeah, the Madrona Culinary Guild has a whole bunch of cookbooks that have all kinds of things, and there's a couple of them I think that focus on stuff that's easy to get and transport and make at events.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, food.
Suggestions to hide the camp stove safely when cooking.
Oh,
Honestly, we don't hide them.
we
What
don't
do is
worry about
put
it
them
while we're
away
cooking. We just
after
put them
we're
away.
cooking.
Yeah. But what we use are those little square
Food service.
butane food service burners that are just like an extra burner for an industrial kitchen kind of thing. And so they're, as you mentioned earlier, interchangeable. So they all use the same fuel canisters. We all have the same style. And as soon as they cool off, you just put them back in their little case and their little black cube. So they're really unobtrusive looking, and they're easy to throw a cloth over. And there isn't a lot of setup and breakdown. It's just shut the lid and you're done. Yeah, clever ways to let dishes dry. Again, we cheat on that a little bit in that our people that transport the kitchen stuff have this round slatted plastic table that looks kind of like a wood deck table, but it's plastic. And so we just sort of put our, again, Ikea, those little wooden dish drying racks that you can get at Ikea that look like they're made out of sort of heavy matchstick kind of wood. So again, perioid, it's
Spring
probably
rack.
not a period shape or anything, but it looks wood and unobtrusive. And so that's just the drying table. And so whoever's doing dishes just stacks it up on that. And again, we've all trained ourselves to get our dishes off of that as soon as they're dry, so we don't end up with more than fits. So some of that's just housebreaking your campmates so that they put their stuff away. And, you know, again, with our sort of like cooperative model, everybody's kind of responsible for their own dishes. So we end up without a huge quantity all in one place. People kind of distribute them back to their tents until it's time for the next meal. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Pulled pork and taco meat. Yum.
Now I'm hungry.
Already cooked. Good idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then lunch we tend to do like charcuterie and cheese and things that again are very easy for people to contribute what they can, and it's all easily expandable.
Yeah.
Whoever comes brings food, so we end up with enough food for everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just pre-make like big stews and soups and stuff and freeze them in.
Yep.
And then you can use
Yes.
them as ice in the cooler and as they thaw out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
that totally works. Yeah, we freeze the kebab seal meal things as these kind of flat plate things that you can stack things between in the cooler and just use them as ice until it's the day that they're going to get eaten, and then we just pull them out. So yeah, those kind of dual duty things help a lot with camping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Tents, fresh cooking.
And a lot of hummus and pita.
Yeah. But there's a lot of great period feeling camp food that you can just buy at the store and bring and unwrap. And it doesn't have to be a big challenge for it to feel like a period meal. You know, sometimes there's a couple of main recipes that can really push it into the world of fabulousness, even though 90% of it's purchased stuff that people just can bring and show up with. So it doesn't have to be complicated to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, great.
Any other questions or anything?
This was awesome, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Yeah, we've definitely covered a lot of topics, and to be able to kind of follow you on the evolution of your encampment has been eye-opening, I think, to quite a few people in terms of how to achieve what you've got.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for
You're
coming
very
out.
welcome.
Thanks for running it.
If there aren't any more questions, maybe what I can do, we often have a short time of socializing after we're done, and I can turn the recording off and people can just hang out for a bit.
Right on.
Cool.
Sounds good.
On behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you very much for coming out.
Thanks.
My pleasure.